At least 5 injured in explosion outside of California Fertility Clinic. There's an IVF clinic in Palm Springs, and a car bomb exploded near it.
One person killed, and local authorities say it appears to be an intentional act of terrorism. ABC's Jacqueline Lee is there in Palm Springs this morning. Good morning, Jacqueline.
Gio, good morning. You can really get an idea of the magnitude of this explosion. The contents of the building spread across all 5 lanes of this main road. Now authorities are focused on identifying the person killed. This morning, a car explosion rocking a Palm Springs fertility clinic in what officials are calling an act of terrorism.
Terrorism came knocking on the door of Palm Springs. We survived.
The blast so powerful, it injured at least 4 people, killed 1, and severely damaged buildings spanning multiple blocks Saturday.
We have a black cloud of smoke coming up.
This was probably one of the largest bombing investigations that we've had in Southern California.
Officials have a person of interest, but said they are not actively searching for a suspect. The person killed was found near the charred car on scene, but officials would not share if that person was a victim or suspect.
We heard this loud noise. We actually thought something had hit our building.
The car explosion originated in the parking lot of the American Reproductive Center, which describes itself as Coachella Valley's first and only full-service fertility center and IVF lab. The center, writing in a statement, "We are immensely grateful to share that no members of the ARC team were harmed, and our lab, including all eggs, embryos, and reproductive materials, remains fully secure and undamaged."
People are saying in the chat that like the initial suspicion is that it's like a right-wing guy, right? It's like a MAGA guy or like a super far-right Christian guy who thinks IVF is like illegal or should be illegal, an affront to God, whatever. It seems, however, that the motive was, and this is shocking, but I guess not so shocking given the world we live in. The motive might have been very Reddit motivated. Law enforcement officials in California believe the motive for the bombing of the fertility clinic in Palm Springs appears to be antinatalism. The belief that there should be no more procreation, according to multiple officials briefed on the investigation. The FBI is handling the matter as an act of domestic terrorism which fits the alleged motive. Social media post by the person police believe is responsible is being investigated. For those of you who don't know what antinatalism is, I mean, it is a philosophical belief that no one actually consents to being born, and that given the fact that you are, given the fact that you have the capacity to experience a tremendous amount of harm when you are born into this planet, that it is an inherently unjustifiable and inherently selfish act by your parents to give birth to you, and that no one should give birth. It is like the most Reddit-ass fucking opinion you can arrive at, I think. He literally brings up r/anti-sex in his manifesto and multiple other subreddits. Yeah. We are officially in the most like Reddit-ass. I mean, dude, this is the most Reddit bombing of all time. It's so fucking insane. It's so insane. I'm pretty sure I saw something that he had a pact with a friend. She's unfortunately committed, so he did as well. I don't know if there's a huge contributor, but I believe it's true. Yeah. It is the most American thing that could have ever happened, where you have people that basically, people with every different type of attitude, every different political background, losing their minds, becoming more and more angry, becoming more and more violent, with the tools to be able to act out this violence, and no interest in their future, and just using whatever tools is readily at their disposal, like Reddit, to radicalize themselves into a position that urges them to act this way. America is the nation of stupids and crazies. That much is clear. It is the nation of stupids and the nation of crazies. Everyone is nihilistic. Everyone is losing their fucking minds, and everyone's getting fried by their algorithms. And reaching further and further into reaching further and further towards just engaging in insane acts of violence. Isn't the philosophy morally just, though? Not saying the actions are justifiable. This is why I mean, like, I think people with autism should not encounter philosophy too much. I think like it creates a dangerous combination. I'm autistic. I ain't this stupid. I mean, I'm just saying. Like, what do I always say in this chat? There's always a guy that goes, "Hold up, is he cooking?" No matter what, no matter how dumb an idea is in the chat, you will always have someone go, "Wait a minute, was he cooking though? Wait a minute. Let me dive a little bit deeper into this, Let me dive a little bit deeper into the morality of this." I mean, it's like it's anti-human. It's just like I don't know. I feel like antinatalism is somewhat of a meme philosophy, I think. Before people get super mad at me, everything that I've read about it is so ridiculous at the end of the day, because yeah, that's what makes us human. We experience negative consequences. We experience tremendous pain. Yes, it's not guaranteed that life is going to be great, but overcoming said trials and tribulations is what makes life worth living. And clearly people still, clearly people still choose to live, right? No matter how shitty things are. Otherwise, everyone would be just fucking killing themselves nonstop, left and right. That's it. I feel like it's on the opposite end of the spectrum of what a lot of our brilliant billionaires are on. Like, all of these Elon Musk style billionaires are worried about the birth rates declining in developed nations, and they lose their minds over it. They're like endlessly talking about how we need to just keep breathing. They're pro-natalist, and that's also weird. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you got the Redditors who are like, we shouldn't, it's an unjustifiable hierarchy you brought about someone who had no capacity to consent to being born, and therefore it should not happen. Fantastic. Anyway, what is this official? Welcome. Here you can download the recorded stream of my suicide and bombing of an IVF clinic. Please do redistribute and upload wherever you can. Is this confirmed? Anyway, suspect believed to be the perpetrator of the Fertility Clinic bombing in Palm Springs, California, Saturday has been identified as 25-year-old Guy Edward Bartkus, a resident of 29 Palms, home to a large U.S. Marine Corps base about an hour's drive from Palm Springs, the FBI confirmed at a Sunday news conference. The suspect stated in writings or recordings that he was against bringing people into the world against their will, according to law enforcement sources familiar with the investigation. This is r/antinatalism, a little bit of a meme philosophy that the suspect allegedly believes. The bomb used has been identified as a large vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, and its blast could be felt more than a mile away from the blast zone. We believe he was the subject found by the vehicle, Akil Davis, assistant director in charge of the FBI Los Angeles field office, said of Bartkus on Sunday's news conference, noting that the agency was working to confirm his death. The vehicle was a 2010 silver Ford Fusion sedan, Davis added. Davis also said Bartkus was not on the FBI's radar. That's what he said. So, contrary to what they normally say, where they always are like, well, this person was on our radar. They didn't say the line. Say the line, Bart. They didn't say the line. The attack, he said, marked the largest bombing ever investigated in Southern California. The subject had nihilistic ideations, and this was a targeted attack, Davis said. We believe he was attempting to live stream it, and yes, that is also part of our investigation. The cause of the blast appears to be a large vehicle-borne IED of the sort we have seen before in numerous conflict zones, according to CBS law enforcement analyst Richard Esposito. Based on the damage surrounding the buildings, on damage to the surrounding buildings. The blast radius was significant, sending shutters across Palm Springs more than a mile to a mile and a half away, according to witnesses. It does require some planning and some skill to build a bomb of this kind, although we have seen similar devices with even more significant damage before, including the horror of the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. That's where it is. That's where we're at. Fantastic.
Authorities raided a property in 29 Palms believed to be related to the suspect, not providing more details, but clarifying they believe the explosion was an isolated incident.
The American Reproductive Center says it will be fully operational come tomorrow morning. And guys, get this. Authorities say that a witness noticed there was a tripod and a camera at the scene of the explosion as if it were being live streamed. The investigation continues. Janae.
Also, the mod of the, I guess, subreddit released a press statement saying, "It has come to my attention that the individual responsible for today's bombing in Palm Springs name-dropped our communities in their suicide note. Though they struggle with personal grief and mental health issues, their act of terrorism was unjustifiable, incoherent, immoral, and disgusting. The philosophy we represent is explicitly one of nonviolence. We believe it is up to each individual to make their own reproductive decisions. We hope that the Palm Springs American Reproductive Center can rebuild and resume operations." Noom Macaroon, president of the Apenis Society, head moderator of r/antinatalism, r/circlesnip, associate moderator of r/vistopia. Putting your subreddit communities that you moderate is so crazy on a press briefing. What the is happening on the planet, dude? It's over. We are living in the craziest dystopia.
A press conference.
Anyway, here's more information on the dead suspect from the police report that came afterwards.
Live press conference in Palm Springs by several authorities, including the FBI and the Palm Springs Police Department, about that fertility clinic bombing. The biggest news that we got out of this, Irene, is that the suspect that they believe is the person of interest, Guy Edward Barkis, a 25-year-old from 29 Palms, they believe at this current time.
Is this the fall of civilization? Maybe. Sometimes I think we have the capacity to normalize all of this stuff that we're seeing and experiencing, and then before you know it, it becomes just like the normal state of affairs, the normal state of reality. So perhaps this is one of those moments. Maybe there was ridiculous acts of violence in the past. I mean, luckily this one didn't actually end up severely harming anyone except for the person who detonated himself outside of the clinic. But what's really interesting is I'm sure there were versions of this time adjusted to the Middle Ages or whatever, you know what I mean? Like some kind of hell-bent guy who thinks that he must end the heretics or something. Like, what would be the Middle Age version of this? I'm thinking. Obviously, they don't have vehicle-borne IEDs back then, but they had some stupid things like this. I'm sure there were stupids back then too. Anabaptist rebellion, a doomsayer. No, I'm not talking about the Inquisition. Those are systematic forms of violence that are commonplace in modernity as well. I'm talking about people who are just insane, adjusted to the time frame that's against the systems, but also in a way that doesn't really make sense. Okay, someone thinking that they're reacting to the normal state of existence and taking matters into their own hands in this way, but in a way that makes no sense whatsoever. Like when you guys bring up Guy Fawkes or something, it's here's an example that's not comparable to this. John Brown. Okay. John Brown was also a bit of a crazy guy, but morally he was on the right side, fighting against systems that were completely unjustifiable. Chattel slavery, the enslavement of black people, right? So that's not a good comparison. I'm talking during the time of the Salem witch trials, if someone was like, actually, the real problem isn't the Salem witch trials in and of itself, but the fact that women exist. So we should all, like, a guy that takes into his own hands this matter and decides to just like cut out the middleman and kill women directly. That would be an equivalent to what this guy is doing.
Based off of the evidence that they have seen, he is the person of interest and the person that died in this. And it was found, his body was found next to the vehicle that was used as an explosive device.
Yeah, they're using the words fairly confident that this is the identity of the suspect and the person who was found who deceased there at the scene. The other big part of this news conference that we're taking away is that all of the embryos in this reproductive facility were saved. So that is the good news for a lot of the people who are trying to create those families through this center.
And the 4 people that were injured, the other people that were injured in this who were possibly nearby, they were hospitalized, but then we've learned they are out of the hospital. They've been released. So that is good news that the embryos have all been saved and that the other people, maybe the bystanders in this. But they were saying the evidence goes hundreds of feet in each direction around the explosion with the vehicle. And the vehicle was a 2020 silver Ford Fusion sedan, and he said it went hundreds of feet into the air.
Like, social maladies have always existed. This is not new. I mean, think about all the pogroms, like anti-Jewish pogroms and different types, like the witch trials, right? Like, this is not new necessarily, but I think given technological advancements, the impact of said crazies that decide to take matters into their own hands is far more consequential. And also, I don't think we're doing a good job dealing with any of this stuff because everyone is just hyper online and get radicalized in their own unique hug boxes, their own unique echo chambers, where people are constantly telling them, yes, you are right. You are so right. And when you don't have that normal mechanism, the social function of third spaces is that you're supposed to go and be around other human beings, either because, you know, you have a job and in order to commute to your job, you see other people during transit and you get to test your ideas around other normal human beings. And then that social function is supposed to basically curb your more ridiculous opinions and I guess like create a sense of normalcy, like recenter you. We don't have any of that anymore. And I feel like this plays a big role in the way that people become dumber and also become crazier. Yeah, a Unabomber in basically every online community, you know? We're so cooked when you're calling a bus a third space. No, I'm saying not only do we not have third spaces, we also don't have like public transit and things that you would normally, places where you would normally encounter other human beings. This social function is incredibly important. Humans are social beings, social animals. Bad take. This is a description of gaslighting. What? What are you even saying? That's not even a response to anything that I just said. But in any case, like that is supposed to be a balancing act, right? Okay, look, I agree with you, but it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. Some people are sensitive and are appropriately terrified by what's going on in the world. Dystopia, right? This is precisely what I mean. Like, no disrespect. This is perhaps one of the worst communities to say this in because a lot of you are extremely online, myself included. But like, no, it's not about refusing to recognize the atrocities that are unfolding all around us. But like, you unironically should not be going into a space with other individuals that have that exact same perspective, because that shuts you off from like talking to normal people and rebalancing your worldview. Aren't you afraid of crime? I guess that is like the crime panic born out of constantly watching local news is a different version of this, is perhaps like the more reactionary version of people who are terrified of climate change and all of the other systemic forms of violence that people are subjected to, both in the global south and even here in the United States of America. And this is like the right-wing reactionary version of that, the crime panic. These are things that happen, okay? These are things that happen. It's a normal part of the process. And when I tell you like you're supposed to be normal, this is part of what I'm talking about, which is that like we should seek to eliminate these sorts of issues. We should work to eliminate these sorts of issues, and it requires a tremendous undertaking. Having said that, it shouldn't cripple you senseless. It shouldn't stop you from experiencing your normal day-to-day existence, okay? Perhaps I'm on the extreme end of this spectrum as someone who routinely is victim to death threats with regular frequency. And my friends think I'm insane for refusing to take this stuff seriously. But in my perspective, if I took all of this stuff seriously, I wouldn't be able to leave my fucking house. And I feel like I would inevitably become an insane person if I were just like so sheltered from the everyday existence. I don't want to be paralyzed by constant fear. The way my brain works is kind of like this. I'll give you an example. Your ears have the capacity to hear a lot more noise than you actually listen to, okay? We shut off certain noises because if we were to constantly hear all of the noises that we have the capability of hearing, we would go fucking crazy, right? You'd go crazy. And that's the way I see it. That's the way I see all of these other social maladies or systemic forms of violence and you know, crime happening, where it's like you can recognize it, you can understand that it is a normal part of it's a normal part of existence, but you shouldn't constantly tune into that frequency, because if you did, you would go insane. Okay? You would go insane if you were to recognize all of the violence that's unfolding all around you. If you live in a city, for example, you would lose your mind. That's why I'm very much against apps like Nextdoor and Citizen and Ring and all these other like user-generated content applications about crime, because when I had Ring on my phone, I would constantly be notified of my paranoid neighbors and what they perceive to be like a crime happening. Okay? I feel like those apps have unironically made people more fascist, because yeah, those crimes do happen, but if you were to constantly fucking tune into those crimes happening, it creates a sense of panic. It's mass hysteria. Pair that up with a media diet that consists of like a hyper focus on like crime happening in big cities, and you arrive at boomers having their brains broken by constant crime. That paired up with the fact that crime, or at least poverty, which people assume sometimes correctly is an indication of crime, is all around you, especially if you live in a big city. Homelessness, right? And then it creates this unique place in your mind where you're like, this is all around. This is crazy. You're wrong about part of this. It's not part of the human existence to know everything going on all the time. The internet has given us access to too much information. Human brains are not equipped to handle it. I mean, yeah, I don't disagree with it. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that like you're supposed to tune it out. You're supposed to go, yeah, it's normal. It happens. The great example I always use is Austin, right? Austin lives in a suburb. He lives in a suburb in Portland. So he's not used to hearing police sirens all the time. But if you live in a city, whether it be New York or even a city like Los Angeles, right? You're used to it. You're used to hearing police sirens. You're used to hearing emergency services pass through. If you're in a suburb and you hear police sirens, you're like, oh my God, this is unique. What the hell's going on? I guess my next door neighbor killed his whole family. But if you live in a place like Los Angeles and you hear emergency services outside, you're like, oh, that's normal. That's a normal part of living in a city because things are always happening. If you're so adjusted to that frequency of never hearing sirens, okay, because you don't live in a densely populated area, and then you actually move to a densely populated area, or you're visiting a densely populated area, which also obviously increases the likelihood of things happening, crimes, violence, fires, and the like, you're going to freak out. And what you are supposed to do in that process is just go, okay, maybe this is normal. That is a major difference between people that have only grown up in the suburbs and like segregated communities and people who grew up in big cities. Major problem here in America, a nation comprised of enclaves and exurbs and suburbs that surround these cities, rural areas that are all around. America is so vast and so large that, yes, there are a lot of places where, there are a lot of places that are densely populated, but there's also plenty of areas that, have a ton of people living in them that are completely isolated.
And they're calling it now like the biggest explosion or bomb in Southern California history.
Yes, absolutely. And we're also learning a little bit more about the suspect, what the FBI knows about the suspect's background. They say that he had nihilistic ideations.
All that hippy-dippy touchgrass bullshit is great and all, but how will the tech billionaires get the absolute maximum ad and data revenue by algorithmically entrapping the population amorally with no care for the ramifications? It's not cheap to live in a palace far away from all the effects you cause. I think one of the funnier parts about this is that capitalism, or the dogmatic approach to capitalism, has also created this weird structure where like billionaires cannot shelter themselves from the worst impacts of the society that they've designed for themselves. They are ruining everything. They're ruining society for themselves as well, but they're so invested in short-term profit seeking that they can't even comprehend it. Climate change is perhaps one of the greatest examples of this, because you don't live in Mars, dude. You don't live somewhere else. You still live on this planet, okay? Sure, in the short term, you will be better off than the rest of humanity that won't be able to shelter themselves from the impacts of anthropogenic climate change, especially people who live in poorer neighborhoods, right? But like, what's going to happen? What's the end point? You can't live in a space station, or even if you wanted to live in a fucking space station, is that a far preferable mode of existence than like just living on this planet in a way that is more sustainable, in a way that is habitable for all? That's it. It's so dumb. It's an incredibly nearsighted way of approaching reality because you're just so hyper invested in short-term profits. Like we talk about, or these guys talk about living in Mars or whatever, but it's like, dude, if you're talking about terraforming and utterly uninhabitable place all the way out there, okay, which we don't even know if we have the capacity to get to and like live sustainably, okay? Why don't you fucking fix Earth first? The lies I see about trans people online is wild. Counterpoint: real world people treat me amazingly. Online is a mess for trans people. The further right you go, the more recluse the populace seems to be, hence the incel issue, I guess. I mean, that's part of it. And I think that incel issue is like bipartisan. I think it's just something that impacts a lot of people, regardless of their political perspectives. And once you're hit with that brain poison, you turn more right-wing, you turn more sheltered, you become more fearful, you become more paranoid, and your hyper-focus is like systemic violence that you perceive, but from an incredibly narrow scope, the scope of women existing and harming you. Feminism. The social maladies I speak of are identical, whether it be transphobia or whether it be hating women. It's identical. It's just a false attribution to the violence that you're subjected to, like structural violence that you're subjected to. It's just misplaced anger with no one trying to redirect your attention to the actual issues, the actual things that ruin your life. Every lib radfem I know who started leaning right started with transphobia. Yeah,
They're calling this an intentional act of terrorism. The FBI also is tracking a possible manifesto. That suspect was also trying to live stream the attack as it was happening. No confirmation on if he was successful or not in doing so. But this is the first time that this person has been on the FBI's radar. Not to say that he has not had a criminal history before.
And they've received hundreds of tips, they said, from people throughout the community about this, and they continue to investigate. There's still gaps in the investigation where he went before the explosion. So they're hoping that they can piece together all the information that they're receiving from people. They said to contact the FBI tip line, that's FBI.gov, Palm Springs vehicle explosion. And that is something that can help them as they try to piece this all together. Maybe that manifesto will release more information on this.
And again, the federal and local officials are confirming that there is no threat to the public at this point in time, and they are not looking for any other suspects right now.
Yeah, Andrew, episode 1, also talked about the IVF bombing in Palm Springs and the bomber being a Redditor. The biggest voice of modern antinatalism is a South African atheist Zionist. Maybe one of the most Redditor-style guys you could be. David Benatar, born 1966, is a South African philosopher, academic, and author. He is best known for his work in moral philosophy and for advancing the position of antinatalism, the view that coming into existence is a serious harm. He's the author of Better Never to Have Been, The Harm of Coming into Existence, in which he argues that procreation is always morally wrong because it imposes harm by bringing sentient beings into existence. Central to his view is his asymmetry argument, which holds that the absence of pain is good, even if no one benefits from it, while the absence of pleasure is not bad unless someone is deprived of it. Benatar has also written on topics including death, ethics, human suffering, and gender discrimination. He's emeritus professor of philosophy at the University of Cape Town and is a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Controversial Ideas. As I described to you what antinatalism is, I think I did a pretty good job of explaining it to you because I'm familiar with his work. I did not know he was also a pro-Israel kind of guy. Yeah, antinatalist people are also annoying, just like pronatalist people are. Another backtrack, Bongino's whole job